London in the first years of the 19th century learned its lessons quietly, through glances and murmurs, through what was permitted to be said aloud and what was left to echo in corridors long after the doors had closed. On such a morning, pale with winter light and heavy with expectation, the townhouse of the Duke of Ashbourne stood immaculate and aloof, its stone facade reflecting the certainty of power. Inside, time moved to the rhythm of privilege, measured by bells, footsteps, and the unchallenged assumption that obedience was as natural as breath. Miss Eleanor Hale stood near the window of the Duke's aunt's morning room, hands folded with deliberate calm, her posture neither submissive nor bold. She wore nothing remarkable, yet there was precision in her stillness, a care that suggested long practice in making oneself unobtrusive without becoming invisible. As a temporary companion to Lady Ashbourne, her role was modest: to read aloud, to assist with correspondence, to offer company without presuming familiarity. It was a position balanced delicately between necessity and dependence, and Eleanor understood its dangers better than most. She had learned them early, after her father's fall from favor stripped their family of security and left behind only reputation's fragile shell. Captain Hale's disgrace was never spoken of directly, yet it hovered like smoke over Eleanor's name, lending urgency to her caution and sharpness to her pride. Education had been her inheritance instead of fortune, languages, history, the discipline of silence. These were tools, not ornaments, and she wielded them carefully. The Duke of Ashbourne entered the room with the confidence of a man who had never been required to measure his steps. Tall, immaculately dressed, and already weary of the morning's obligations, he carried authority as though it were woven into his coat. To him, the household functioned as an extension of his will, each person a cog whose purpose was efficiency. He acknowledged his aunt with dutiful affection, then turned his attention toward the matter that irritated him most: the inconvenience of having strangers under his roof. Lady Ashbourne, gentle yet firm, spoke warmly of Eleanor's assistance, praising her attentiveness and discretion. The Duke listened with half an ear, impatience tightening his expression. When Eleanor was asked to fetch a ledger, she moved at once, but not before the Duke's gaze fixed upon her with cool appraisal. In that look lay assessment without curiosity, judgment without inquiry. He spoke before she had crossed the room. "I fail to see why such arrangements require prolongation," he said, his voice measured but edged. "Companions are easily found. I can hire 50 like you without difficulty." The words struck the room into silence. Servants paused in unseen corners, breath held. Eleanor stopped, turned, and faced him fully. For a heartbeat, the distance between them seemed to close, not in intimacy but in challenge. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the warning that humiliation, if accepted, would settle like a stain. Yet her expression remained composed, her chin level. "Then I recommend your grace do so," she replied, voice steady, precise, and unmistakably calm. She executed a curtsy of flawless correctness, one taught in better days, gathered her gloves, and walked from the room without haste or apology. It was the manner of her departure that unsettled him most. There was no tremor, no plea, no bitterness offered to soften the defiance. She did not look back. The door closed with a quiet finality that seemed louder than any rebuke. Lady Ashbourne gasped softly, while the Duke stood unmoving, irritation curdling into something unfamiliar. He had spoken without thought, certain of his dominance, yet her response left no space for satisfaction. The exchange, so brief, carried an aftershock he could not dismiss. He told himself it was insolence, nothing more, and turned his attention elsewhere, though the morning's tasks lost their clarity. Eleanor descended the townhouse steps into the chill air, her breath clouding briefly before vanishing. Only when she reached the street did her composure waver, just enough for her fingers to tighten around her gloves. She knew what she had risked. Employment, reputation, future security all trembled beneath that single sentence. Yet to remain would have cost her something less visible and far more precious. By afternoon, whispers had begun. A servant mentioned it to a cousin to a friend, and soon the tale traveled, reshaped with every telling. A companion dismissed? No, a companion who refused dismissal. Such nuance was irresistible. Eleanor's name circulated cautiously, paired with raised brows and speculative smiles. Some pitied her, others condemned her imprudence, and a few admired her audacity from a safe distance. Within the Duke's household, the incident lingered like a draught. He dismissed it publicly, remarking that replacements were easily arranged. Yet privately he found his thoughts returning to her composure, to the way she had denied him the expected victory of submission. It was an irritation, he insisted, nothing more, though it disturbed his rest and followed him through the day. That evening, as correspondence was laid before him, a document caught his attention, a note from his solicitor regarding Lady Ashbourne's affairs, mentioning her intention to retain Miss Eleanor Hale in matters yet unresolved. The name seemed to rise from the page with quiet insistence. The Duke paused, fingers resting against the paper, aware for the first time that the woman who had walked away from his authority had not, in fact, left his world. She had merely shifted her place within it, and the echo of her refusal had only just begun to sound. He leaned back, unsettled by the realization, and allowed the fire to burn low as night gathered beyond the windows. Power, he had always believed, announced itself unmistakably. Yet somewhere between a careless sentence and a quiet curtsy, it had been challenged, and the challenge lingered, patient and unresolved, waiting for the hour when it would demand an answer. He did not know how deeply. The season advanced, and with it the quiet machinery of society resumed its turning, carrying Eleanor Hale back into the orbit she had attempted to leave. It occurred not by invitation but by necessity, the unyielding hand of legal formality guiding her steps once more toward the Duke of Ashbourne's world. Lady Ashbourne's affairs, complicated by age and wavering memory, required witnesses, correspondence, and careful oversight, and Eleanor's name appeared upon the solicitor's papers as the only person possessed of sufficient familiarity and discretion. To refuse would have been impractical, to accept demanded courage. She arrived at the appointed gathering with her composure restored, her resolve settled like armor beneath silk. The assembly was modest yet exquisitely arranged, drawing together a careful selection of relations and acquaintances whose glances carried more weight than their words. Chandeliers shed warm light upon polished floors, and conversation flowed with the practiced ease of those accustomed to being observed. Eleanor felt the stir her presence caused before she heard it spoken, sensed curiosity ripple outward as eyes measured her with renewed interest. She stood apart, greeting those who addressed her with civility, refusing neither warmth nor humility, yet offering nothing that invited familiarity. When the Duke entered, the room adjusted around him, attention shifting instinctively toward his presence. He paused upon seeing her, the smallest hesitation betraying what he would not acknowledge. Eleanor inclined her head with impeccable courtesy, neither retreating nor advancing, and turned away to attend Lady Ashbourne. The restraint of that gesture struck him more keenly than anger would have done. He found himself watching her from across the room, noting how she listened, how she spoke when required, how she refused to perform humility for admiration. In the days that followed, circumstances contrived to place them repeatedly within sight of one another. Each encounter carried the same measured politeness, the same careful avoidance of private address. Yet beneath the surface, something restless stirred. The Duke, accustomed to swift compliance, discovered that silence could provoke more unease than open challenge. Eleanor, for her part, sensed his attention and refused to alter her conduct in response. She had learned that dignity, once surrendered, was rarely returned intact. It was after the third such meeting that the Duke sent the parcel. It arrived without flourish, accompanied by a brief note expressing hope that certain volumes might be of use in Lady Ashbourne's work. The books were well chosen, their bindings worn but respectful, titles reflecting thoughtful consideration rather than ostentation. Eleanor recognized the gesture for what it was, an attempt at reparation disguised as practicality. She did not open the package. Instead, she returned it the same afternoon, her reply concise and formal, thanking His Grace for his thoughtfulness while explaining that she could not accept gifts beyond her station. The refusal did not remain private. In a society attuned to every deviation from expectation, the act was dissected with relish. Some admired her restraint, others questioned her gratitude, and a few whispered that the Duke's interest itself was cause for speculation. Eleanor felt the weight of those whispers pressing closer, narrowing her freedom of movement. Invitations ceased arriving. Conversations faltered upon her approach. She endured it with patience, reminding herself that endurance was a skill she possessed in abundance. The Duke, meanwhile, discovered that irritation had given way to something more persistent. Her refusal, measured and irrevocable, stripped his gesture of its intended effect and left him exposed to scrutiny. He could not deny the care with which he had selected the books, nor the sting of having that care rejected. It was not anger that followed but a grudging respect, and beneath it, a curiosity he had never before indulged. Their confrontation came unexpectedly, summoned by circumstance rather than design. A sudden storm scattered guests from Lady Ashbourne's garden, driving Eleanor to seek shelter beneath a stone pavilion as rain fell in heavy sheets. She was alone only moments before the Duke joined her, drawn by the same necessity. The space was narrow, the sound of rain enclosing them in privacy neither had intended. For a time, neither spoke. The tension between them was palpable, sharpened by proximity and restraint. "I did not mean to insult you," he said at last, his voice quieter than she remembered. It was not an apology, but it was not command. Eleanor regarded him steadily, noting the effort evident in his composure. "Meaning is less powerful than effect, Your Grace," she replied. "I could not remain where I was reminded of my replaceability." The honesty of her words unsettled him. He had been taught to regard such truths as inconveniences, easily dismissed. Yet here, in the narrow shelter of the pavilion, they refused to be dismissed. He spoke then of obligation, of a world structured by rank and expectation, and found himself confessing, without intention, that her departure had disturbed him more than he cared to admit. The admission hung between them, fragile and unfinished. Eleanor felt the tremor of something dangerous, not hope but recognition. She answered him with equal candor, speaking of pride, of the cost of dependence, and of the line she would not cross again. The rain softened, and with it the moment drew toward its end. They parted without resolution, yet with the knowledge that silence would no longer suffice. As Eleanor walked away, she sensed that the balance between them had shifted, and that the next encounter would demand more than restraint from either of them. Tension ripened into inevitability as Lady Ashbourne's health faltered, drawing the household inward and sharpening every choice that hovered unresolved. Eleanor attended with unwavering care, managing letters and schedules with the calm efficiency that had first earned trust. Yet the narrowing circle of duty placed her repeatedly before the Duke, and each encounter carried the weight of things unsaid. He watched her move through rooms he commanded, aware that authority no longer granted ease. She watched him in turn, discerning effort where once there had been assumption, and guarding herself against the treacherous warmth such effort inspired. The crisis arrived without ceremony, announced by a solicitor's visit and a document that threatened Eleanor's livelihood. A clause, obscure yet enforceable, questioned the propriety of her continued presence given her lack of formal appointment. It was the kind of challenge society favored, polite, procedural, devastating. Lady Ashbourne's confusion rendered her helpless, and the decision fell, by custom, to the Duke. He could dismiss the matter with a signature, severing Eleanor's position cleanly, or he could invite scrutiny by defending her. The room seemed to hold its breath as the paper lay between them. He asked for time, a request that surprised even him. That evening, he paced rooms heavy with inheritance and expectation, confronting the ease with which he might preserve order by sacrificing her. The words he had once spoken returned, stripped of their arrogance, exposing a truth he could no longer deny. Eleanor was not replaceable to him, and the recognition demanded action. By morning, he had chosen, though the choice would cost him standing and invite rumor. When they met, it was in the quiet of the study, firelight tracing the lines of restraint upon his face. He spoke plainly, explaining the risk and his intention to accept it. He did not promise comfort or immunity, only his name set firmly beside hers in defense of her character. The declaration was careful, irrevocable, and public by implication. Eleanor listened, heart steady, mind racing. She understood the magnitude of such an alignment and the scrutiny it would invite. She asked him, not unkindly, why he would do this. "Because I was wrong," he answered, the words simple and exact. "And because I will not be so again." The signature followed, ink drying upon the page like a seal upon fate. The household learned quickly, and with learning came judgment. Some praised the Duke's fairness, others whispered of influence, and a few smiled knowingly, pleased to discover romance where propriety insisted upon distance. Eleanor endured it as she always had, with composure sharpened by gratitude she refused to display as debt. Yet the Duke's defense altered the landscape. Doors reopened cautiously. Conversations softened. The threat receded, though the attention did not. It was in the aftermath, when the immediate danger had passed, that the truth between them demanded voice. He sought her in the evening, finding her alone by the window where she had once stood before everything changed. London glimmered beyond the glass, a city indifferent to private reckonings. He did not command her attention, he asked for it. She granted it, wary but present. He spoke then not as a duke addressing a subordinate, but as a man confronting the consequences of his power. He named the moment she walked away, and admitted that it had taught him more than a lifetime of deference. He told her that his regard had grown not from possession but from restraint, from watching her refuse what others would have seized. The confession was measured, dignified, and sincere. It offered no spectacle, only truth. Eleanor answered with equal care. She spoke of fear mastered daily, of the constant negotiation between survival and self-respect. She acknowledged the change she had witnessed in him, and the gratitude she felt for his choice, yet she did not surrender herself upon that gratitude. She asked him whether he sought to amend a wrong or to claim a reward. The question was fair, and it demanded humility. "I seek your consent," he said, after a pause that felt like prayer. Nothing more, nothing less. The simplicity of the request broke what resistance remained. Consent implied equality of will, a recognition she had guarded fiercely. She did not answer at once. She stepped back, allowing silence its due, then met his gaze with quiet resolve. She told him that affection, if it came, would not erase the imbalance between them, but that respect could bridge it. She would walk beside him only if she might still walk away. He accepted the condition without hesitation. Their understanding did not announce itself with fanfare. It unfolded in small, unmistakable acts, his public acknowledgment of her counsel, her acceptance of his presence without retreat. Society observed, puzzled yet attentive, adjusting its judgments as it always did. Lady Ashbourne, lucid and smiling, offered her blessing with gentle relief. The household settled into a new rhythm, one less certain, more humane. On a clear morning not long after, Eleanor stood upon the steps once more, the city bright before her. The Duke joined her, offering his arm without presumption. She took it freely, the choice her own. Together they descended, neither victorious nor diminished, carrying forward a lesson learned at cost. Power, when tempered by regard, could become something other than domination. Dignity, when defended, could invite love without surrender. The door closed behind them, not upon an ending, but upon a beginning made credible by truth. They moved into the street as equals in intention, if not in station, aware that the future would test what the present had affirmed. London would watch, weigh, and whisper, but neither feared the trial. What endured between them had been chosen deliberately, shaped by refusal and respect. In a world that prized obedience, they had learned the rarer language of consent, and in speaking it, found a harmony sturdy enough to weather scrutiny, silence, and the slow turning of time together, steadfast, unafraid, and quietly transformed.